GM. All right, so everyone is going to be looking at this today, as just naturally they do. So let's compare Bitcoin and ETH on their respective ETF days, right? So Bitcoin's ETF launch was here. ETH's is here. Now, I want to show a couple of things, right? Bitcoin at this point was significantly bullish and overbought on lower time frames and extended above most moving average that you would look at. Let's just put the 50 EMA on, right? As one example. ETH is not, right? So as we go into the day of the launch, ETH has just had a 50 EMA reclaim, right? So like that's like the equivalent of Bitcoin being here. If you want to use one example, that's where Bitcoin is in relation to ETH from a trend perspective. How overbought or oversold is it? Versus the day of Bitcoin's launch, it had been trending up above the 50 for a long time, and it was significantly above it. As it launched, it was significantly above. It'd be like the equivalent of ETH launching. If ETH ETF launched here, yeah, down's the only way you're going to go. From right now, and this is something that needs to be made really clear, the most likely thing that will happen today is that there's going to be some selling from the ETH ETF. That is not the same as a 3-week downtrend that happens on Bitcoin. We're talking one day. So do I think ETH's ETF today could mean that it closes red, where it ends up like down there? Sure. Could it close just with a move back down to the day's open? Sure. Could it spike up higher and close back down here? Yeah. Any of those things can happen. But once the first day or a few days is selling right out of the way, ETH is not in a bearish setup, right? So it's reclaiming some of these levels. It's not bearish. It's not obviously bullish and trending up, but that's good for the idea of there's no trend to end, right? The Bitcoin trend finished, the trend that was front running the ETFs, it finished on the day of the ETF. ETH is not having a trend into the ETF. The trend on ETH ended in March. So that's actually a bullish sign, because a lot of the selling that will come will probably get absorbed. Maybe we can go back and revisit the lows over the next couple of weeks. I mean, that would be fairly normal. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. But I also wouldn't be surprised to see ETH just holding in this area and then just building itself a base as people keep trying to sell. Like, it's the most fucking brain dead thing to just think that you can short ETH. I mean, you're going to get wrecked. People shorting ETH are going to get fucking destroyed. If people think that today is just going to be a carbon copy of the Bitcoin launch, and don't worry, we wait for the spike on launch and then we short it all the way down. I mean, try fucking having a form of analysis that isn't just copy paste of the last thing that happened. Please try something more than just basic pattern matching, which is the lowest form of analysis. It's just apophenia. Don't fucking do it. That's why I put on this EMA to show you the difference. And you can look at this a million different ways. You can look at VWAP bands. You could look at the 100, the 200 EMA, the daily moving averages. You could look at the daily bands, the red and green. You could look at RSI, like even just that, right? So how does the RSI look on both of these? So Bitcoin had put in an enormous fucking bear div across the daily RSI leading into this. Like, look at that. Bitcoin's price had trended higher for 3 months, while RSI was weakening and weakening and weakening, and we had a full, enormous RSI bearish div, which then eventually played out and we flushed down below the 50 point, down to the lows. ETH, again, not the same. We're not at the end of a trend. We're not in the middle of a bearish divergence. In fact, we're coming off of a bullish divergence at the lows, and it's not exactly overbought yet. So there's so many differences, and I'm not RSI guy. I'm not the EMA guy. None of these things matter, right? It's not as if you have to look at the RSI and say, "Oh wow, get max long ETH." It's supposed to show you one thing: this setup for ETH going into ETH's launch is entirely different than Bitcoin's. Price action is not in the same place. Sentiment's not in the same place. Positioning's not in the same place. So don't expect price to do the same thing. Simple, right? So how will ETH actually move? Let me go back to this volume chart. This red zone that I marked out, and ETH followed that path quite nicely. Don't need that anymore because we're on the day of it. It's followed that path quite nicely where I said it would push up through, right, consolidate, and if it just holds the red box, that's where I would be looking at ETH being bullish. So that means throughout all the selling of today or the next few days, it could spike down, it could spike down, it can do all that. But as long as ETH stays above 32.20, I think it's bullish. The reason why you don't want it accepting back in there is because when it accepts down there, it has a tendency to spend several weeks there. And so if it were to fall back inside here after already being there recently, it probably ends up stuck and chopping for another bit. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but I think if you're a bull, you prefer to see ETH show some strength and then have a wick down into there and continue to show strength, and that would be a nice, reaccumulation, retest, and boom, away it goes. But daily perspective, let's zoom all the way in. ETH seeing this nice big spike up as we head towards the launch, as basically shorts that are thinking that this is somehow a bearish event are just going to get obliterated, right? People who take positions based upon something like an ETF, thinking that this is somehow bearish, are first of all ignoring reality. Bitcoin has had $18 billion of inflows in the past 6 months. Any rational person looking at Ethereum will think, okay, it won't get 18 billion, but if BTC did 18 billion for 6 months, maybe ETH gets 20% of that. So ETH's going to get 3 or 4 or 5 billion in the first 6 months. That's net inflows, positive flows, right? That's including grayscale selling, because Bitcoins is also including the grayscale selling. So if all the estimates are that ETH's first 6 months will have some kind of positive flows, it's not going to match Bitcoin's, but it will be positive, then why would you be shorting on the launch day with a high time frame view? Makes no fucking sense. Now, can there be pullbacks? Yes, absolutely. But shorting inside of this fucking, rising consolidation, where? What are you doing? What edge do you have? Fucking zero. There's no weakness here, right? It's building up. It's building up. It's clearly going to push higher. Now, if it takes that high, falls back inside, rejects, breaks down to there, bounces up, that's when it starts to become attractive for shorts, right? Look at that potential path. This is how markets move, right? Currently, ETH is in an uptrend. ETH is currently going up and has not broken any structure yet. For something to go this way, where people want it, to down, it has to break that and then do that. It hasn't had any break. There's no break. So even just keep it really fucking simple. You don't have to long ETH. You don't have to short ETH. You don't have to do anything. But if you did want to short, because by the way, your bias should absolutely be long. We are in an early uptrend. It is a bullish event overall. Even if there's grayscale selling initially, it's still a bullish event overall for Ethereum to get an ETF. That's undeniable. And it has not broken any structure, right? The swing low that matters is over here. That's the swing low, right? That was the move down there. Then we consolidated in this nice tight consolidation, moves up, more consolidation up here. Your original swing low stays intact. So if ETH goes like that, and then that is where it looks good for shorts. It has to break the fucking structure. And it hasn't done that. Alternatively, it can set this. So if ETH pushes higher, that now becomes your swing low. If it then rejects, comes back down, breaks that, then boom, that now, with a failed attempt to go higher and a retest of that level, is starting to look like something that might roll over. But there's not, I just don't see it. No reason to be long, no reason to be short. would be my view. When I say no reason to be long, if you're holding spot, that's fine. Would I advise adding a long trade here? Not necessarily. Intraday, I expect some whipsaw. So just look at your key levels, look at the highs when that gets touched off, and then look at this low. I would say they're the two obvious levels for stops to be resting. And as a day trader, you're probably looking at both those areas for a reaction, right? We might see, if you then zoom into like a 1 hour, you might see something like that where, you know, people are short at the moment into the launch, they get blown out to the upside, falls off and fails over. People start to get long, goes down and tackles the long stops. Then we're back to where we started. Maybe this thing is just bullish for another bit. Maybe ETH just wants to go to 3,800 before it meets any major resistance. Then it can pull back from there. It's just the point I made on daily levels remains. This is the middle of a fucking range. High time frame zoomed out, and you need to zoom out. Stop being fucking on the 1 minute chart, obsessed about what's happening with ETH right on the launch. This is in the middle of a range. If you wanted to buy ETH from a high time frame perspective, you want it to go here. That's clearly support. If you want to sell ETH as a bear, you want to sell here, maybe sell there. So there are your areas. This is neither of those, so there's no strong reason to buy, there's no strong reason to sell. Keep that in mind as we go into today's session. GM.